Hi, welcome to Table Talk. I'm your host, Karen Wilson. We have a great show for you today. Very informative, and I'm going to have some information about some things that are going on locally that will help with some environmental problems that we're having on a large scale as far as the state and region goes with our grasslands. My guest today is Miss Brittney Viers. She is with the Grasslands RCPP. I'll let her tell you what all those initials stand for. A lot of acronyms in this business, and she is the coordinating biologist. Welcome to the show, Brittney.
Thank you, Miss Karen. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here with y'all today.
Great. Okay, this is, you sent me a lot of information about what is going to be going on. It's an informative event at Bridgestone. We'll be referencing that later, but begin by telling us about yourself and your role with the Southern Grasslands Initiative.
Yeah, so I grew up in two different states. I was born in Northeast Texas, lived there for a while, spent about half of my childhood there, and then we moved to Southern Indiana, which is a drastic change. But my parents decided to make that move for their careers and to be closer to family. My dad is an agronomist by training and experience. And so I grew up on a row crop farm in Southern Indiana for the rest of my childhood and just always loved being in the outdoors and, hunting and fishing with my dad and helping him on the farm. And I just, like the cliche, I loved nature. That was me. So I went to college at Murray State University in Southwest Kentucky in the Jackson Purchase area, which historically was about 300,000 to 400,000 acres of prairie. So there's still some remnants hanging around in that area. And so I got my bachelor's degree in wildlife biology, and I decided to stay there and get a master's in biology. That was a botany study. So I have a wildlife and plant background, which suits me very well for my current position. While I was in school, I did a lot of summer internships with different wildlife agencies and organizations, and started working in these rare grassland ecosystems, like cedar glades and really drought tolerant and soil, very shallow soil, barrens, woodland savannas, things like that. And I just was very drawn to it, and just started noticing that those communities were in other places that I had lived and worked, even in East Texas, that's part of the Black Belt Prairie. So that's where, I have a deep connection. And so I'm really thankful to be in the role that I am and get to do this for a living. Mm-hmm. I've worked for Quail Forever, which is a nonprofit habitat-based organization, for about 8 years. I was the first, what we call Farm Bill wildlife biologist in Tennessee. So I did that for 6 years, and I came to my supervisors, and partnerships are just what we do. Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever has partnerships all over the country with various agencies, the Natural Resources Conservation Service being the main one, branch of the USDA. So I said to my supervisors, this new entity, this new nonprofit called the Southeastern Grasslands Initiative is really starting to gain momentum, and their mission is very compatible and synonymous with what we're trying to do with Quail Forever, put the habitat back on the ground, especially on private lands and focus on grasslands restoration. And so we, through this RCPP, which stands for the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, we put together a grant proposal and it got approved. And so now I work jointly with Quail Forever and SGI, as we call it. And we implement these farm bill programs for landowners.
So to clarify that, then there's grant money available through this program that helps with grassland initiatives, rebuilding grassland areas that are native to Tennessee. And that's what a lot of the goal is for the organization.
Yes, correct. We have typically RCPPs have a focal region or focal species. And in our case, it's kind of both. We looked at counties in Kentucky and Tennessee, because this is also in Kentucky, available for Kentucky landowners, where we knew that grassland still existed based on historical records and what we know still exists there as far as plant communities and wildlife communities. So that, in conjunction with our 3 grassland focal birds, which are northern bobwhites, Henslow sparrows, and eastern meadowlarks. And bobwhites are, the most noteworthy with landowners, but all of them have experienced massive population declines and are in dire need of our attention and help. Mm-hmm. And it's good that we're trying to focus on private lands, because the majority of, Tennessee is in private ownership. So
on that note, let's go back to what we said about the grasslands and them being endangered and how that affects us.
Yeah. So a lot of folks don't know this, and I didn't know a whole lot about it either until I started working with Dr. Dwayne Estes, who is our executive director of SGI, based out of Austin Peay State University. But we've learned through a lot of these historical records that he has spent countless hours reading through and digging through, that a lot of our prairies and savannas and meadows were the first areas to be cultivated. There is a huge misconception, and it's even taught in elementary history classes, that often in the eastern US that the squirrel could jump from tree to tree, that it was all just mixed hardwood stands and some pines. And we have found that that's just really just not the case at all. And so our prairies in the Southeast were the first ones to plow. Because, you think about it, when the pioneers are moving in and they're trying to settle, you're going to pick the low hanging fruit, so to speak.
Yeah, ground you don't have to clear is much faster than
exactly
and having through that process.
And those areas were super fertile. Generally speaking, they were very fertile, so very good for growing crops. So the tough part about that is so much of those populations have really taken the hardest hit, and there's like 99.9% of our southeastern prairies have been wiped out because of that. So oftentimes we're relying on these clues of what's still remaining and these records that we have to basically recreate the prairies, which is what we've done in some cases through RCPP. The other, I guess, major obstacle that grasslands have faced are like the savannas, woodlands, glades, barrens, and that's because of fire suppression. Natural fires help to maintain those natural communities, and when that is taken away, or the fuel is no longer there, meaning native grasses are no longer there, so that if a lightning strike does occur, you're not going to have a natural fire anymore. just because that fuel is gone just from too much, human manipulation. So fire suppression, and that led to hardwood and some pine encroachment. And so when you've got a woodland or savanna and you take the fire away, it starts to fill in with trees, right? Because the fire is what keeps that community thriving and going, because there are a lot less trees that are resistant to fire compared to the natural, wildflower and grass community, which thrive on that. They have to have some type of disturbance. So when you take the fire away, the trees start to fill in, and then you end up losing your, natural ecosystems. And so what we have found through bringing those two things back, meaning reintroducing fire and starting to do tree thinning to open up canopies to let more sunlight to the floor, the seed bank will almost always return. And so it's like this surprise, you do these two techniques and then you start seeing all these beautiful wildflowers and grasses come back that you never thought were there before. So those are the reasons why grasslands have been suppressed, but they're so important because the Southeast is a hot spot for biodiversity. So when you start, chipping away at that and taking that away, it directly affects us because we don't have native pollinators to pollinate, our fruits and vegetables. So, and then you start to see an ecosystem imbalance where you may start having more pests in areas because there's not enough birds to feed on those insects. So it's just kind of like this trickle down effect, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I could see how getting things off balance, as you said, does affect us and can
Right.
affect our crops and flowers and the bees and everything that we love that we know we need, has
Right.
to live in that world that sometimes ends up getting destroyed over the years. Also, you mentioned the native birds are such a large part of the restoration efforts. Why is that?
Well, they're like the poster species, to be honest. Like, I'll talk about Bob Whites first. They're just so culturally and historically significant and important, for us, especially in the Southeast. I can't tell you how many times I've met with landowners that are much older than me that talk about how they would get home from school and just get their bird dog and walk up and down the dirt farm roads and hunt quail in the afternoons. And it's not just ecologically important to manage for quail and other grassland birds. It's just part of our history, and it's just not something we can afford to lose. I would love to see a resurge and a greater interest in quail hunting, and we certainly try to promote that as much as possible. As far as eastern meadowlarks, talk about a species that used to be so common. I'm 38, and when I was in college doing breeding bird surveys in my early 20s, so 15, 17 years ago, which is not that long in the grand scheme of things, they were just common as dirt everywhere. And in that short period, they have just experienced like a 70 or 80% population decline. And they're a species that is so adaptable. I mean, meadowlarks can live in a fescue field. They can live in a mowed pasture. Not saying that it's necessarily ideal, but the point is they can coexist in some beat up areas, for lack of a better way to describe it. And if we're now seeing them decline, it's a wake up call. We've got to start paying attention. So.
Yeah, birds that we love, grew up with, seeing every day. You don't want to
Yeah.
see these things not exist anymore. So
Right.
your organization will be holding a workshop at Bridgestone to educate
Mhm.
landowners and farmers about some of the components of the 2018 Farm Bill that can help in these restoration efforts. Let's start with talking about the bill and how it helps.
Yeah. So, in the broad sense, the 2018 Farm Bill is what we're currently implementing and operating under, and it's typically renewed about every 4 to 5 years, or updated, I should say. So there are several separate programs offered to anyone that owns property. So you could be, cattle producer, row crop farmer, a wildlife enthusiast, someone that's interested in forest and timber management. Whatever your goals and objectives are, there's probably a program that could be a good fit for you. And I should also um, emphasize that our Farm Bill programs are there to address what we call um, conservation resource concerns, or enhancing property that's already being actively managed. So, they are there and designed to help better the land and financially assist the landowner, whoever that may be.
Mhm. So let's talk about some of the different components of the RCPP program, because there's three, I believe, different areas of outreach or of the program that you could be involved in. Is that correct?
That's right. Yes. So I don't want to be confusing. RCPP has changed a little bit under the new 2018 Farm Bill, and we're still implementing the one that was under the 2014. But RCPP is now a standalone program to where you can just walk in and apply and possibly receive funding for your project. The way our RCPP functions is we have three separate Farm Bill programs kind of under this, what I call the RCPP umbrella.
Mhm.
We have the EQIP, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, that's designed to address those resource concerns that I mentioned. So, you may have an erosion issue that needs to be addressed. Maybe a row crop farmer wants to apply for some assistance with cover crops to help with, soil loss and conserving water. And how it functions is it's like you apply, your application gets ranked, and then you find out if you get approved, you take care of the practice, and then you get a reimbursement based on 75% financial assistance.
Mhm.
So it's loosely based on what your out-of-pocket expense would be for 75% of it.
Okay. And then there's also the stewardship program. Is that correct?
Right? Yes. So there's conservation stewardship program, which the whole point and basis of that is to um, help the folks that are already being good stewards of their property. So we have what's called enhancements that they can apply for and possibly receive some financial assistance for those things. And you could do like pollinator habitat, monarch habitat, um, converting pasture that's in cool season grasses to warm season grasses to help get the cattle over the summer slump, that they have trouble with, so you don't have to feed as much hay. Those are just some examples. And then we have our ASEP WRE, the Wetland Reserve Easement Program, which could be a permanent easement or a 30-year easement on degraded wetlands that need to be restored back to what they once were. And in our case, those are open landscape, wet prairies, like wet grasslands, which White County, Warren County, Coffee County, those are really good indicator areas for where those wet grasslands and prairies used to occur. So that's one of the reasons why we're having a workshop at Bridgestone to try to help landowners and producers in those 3 counties. So those are the 3 main programs.
Okay. And of course, there's a lot that goes into each program, and that's part of why you're holding the workshop at Bridgestone to get in depth
ma'am.
about each program and to, I guess, talk to landowners specifically on which one would apply to them and what the different incentives are to participate. Um,
Right.
so those have never participated in this. All of this information may be a little overwhelming. Once you're in the
Very.
program, yes, how do you
Mhm.
help landowners navigate the program and what they're supposed to do? Is this like a one-on-one thing that you have someone assigned to you that helps you through this, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So those of us that are partner biologists and foresters, we specialize in those practices and enhancements, whatever the program may be, that are wildlife oriented. So we try to know the program specifications and requirements backwards and forwards so that we can be a really solid source of information for the landowner. But NRCS, certainly we couldn't do it without them. And we have a great relationship with our NRCS partners and really consider them more like co-workers because we work in those county NRCS field offices every day, we just alongside them. So the landowner can always come through the door and get assistance and guidance from a district conservationist, a soil conservationist, or a technician, or a soil conservation district employee. And often that's how we get connected with landowners. They may come in the door saying, hey, I heard about some financial assistance for quail habitat. Who can I talk to about that? And then they'll direct the landowner to us. Or sometimes we will get contacted directly through social media advertisement or the Quail Forever website or SGI website, things like that. But it is overwhelming, and we try our best to be very thorough and explain the options to the landowner without trying to overwhelm he or she, him or her. So anyway, that's kind of how it works. We do a lot of hand holding and we're prepared for that because we know how it would be if the role was reversed, so.
There's a lot of farm programs and things out there that there's a lot to keep up with whether you're a farmer or even a nursery person in this area. Nurserymen are very common, lots of nurseries around here. Let's talk about what are some of the specific practices that landowners can do. Say, even if they don't sign up to participate in the program, what can they do to help protect the ecosystem that's already on the land that they own?
Yeah, and that's such a important point that you make because these programs are not just a perfect fit for everyone, and we have a lot of folks that just want some what we call CTA, conservation technical assistance. So some things that you can do are just mow less, don't mow as much, target invasive species. Like oftentimes we make recommendations almost on a daily basis of what to target that doesn't belong there, that is inhibiting something else that does belong there. So, don't mow during the grassland bird nesting season from about mid-April to mid to late September. You can have successful quail nesting going on and turkeys all throughout the growing season. And another good thing is if you can try to leave your cover throughout the winter. A lot of folks do fall mowing. And if you have a specific reason or purpose for that, that's fine. But you're also eliminating any winter habitat if you do it that early. So we recommend, if you're going to mow, to manage, wait until March and try to just do it one time a year. And we can help with making recommendations to target sapling encroachment, or if there are invasive species such as Johnson grass or Sericea lespedeza, we can make very specific targeted herbicide recommendations, or maybe other means. So doing things like that is actually a tremendous benefit, because we also talk about letting natural regeneration take place, to where you're not actually planting something, you're just managing your existing plant community. So those are great things to do for bobwhites, especially in meadowlarks and all grassland species.
So if you're not putting crops out, you're not utilizing your property right now for any kind of income, you can do some things like that to enhance the wildlife and enhance
Yes.
the habitat that you own.
Right. And if you are a producer and you are utilizing your land for any agricultural purpose, think about the areas that are non-productive. Think about maybe a wet area in your field that you can't ever get to drain, or the edge of a field, or your ditch banks, things like that. If you could just back off of those, even 30 to 50 feet is ideal, and just let that cover come back on its own. And if it does come back in something invasive, again, target it with a specific herbicide, and it will be tremendously beneficial for bobwhite quail especially. So that's something to keep in mind, that a lot of folks still need to use their property for their livelihood, and we totally understand that. And there are, we can make recommendations that fit a program or don't, but there are financial assistance options for those non-productive areas as well.
That's good to know that farmers and nurserymen and people like that can still participate in restoring the ecosystem in some way, while still utilizing their ground for their income and things like that. So it's not us against them or anything of that nature. You're trying to work and partner with these people.
Right. Exactly. I can't emphasize that enough, honestly. Yeah.
Well, Brittney, thank you so much. There is a lot to be learned more. This is just the tip of the iceberg. But your event at Bridgestone, give us the date for that and the time, and we want to invite everyone to that.
Yeah, so it'll be June 22nd, and it'll be in the evening for folks that obviously have to work during the day. It'll be from 6 to 8 o'clock at the Bridgestone, their environmental education center. Yes. Yes. And we're going to have food. And because of COVID restrictions, it is capped to about 30 people. So, they do ask to have an RSVP about a week before. But
who does the audience need to RSVP? What is the contact information?
Yeah, so please you could just contact me directly. I'm going to be keeping a list. So my phone number is 731-358-1860.
And I will say that's another reason why we're Zooming today, because Brittney is about 3 hours away. So that's why you're hearing a different area code there. And,
right.
But I'm
not a 931er.
Yeah, that's right. But yeah, you're coming in for the event, and are you going to be the one doing some teaching? Or I noticed lots of different names on the paperwork. So I guess there's multiple people talking.
Yes, we'll have at least 3 speakers. We'll be talking about various types of grassland management and program options, and have plenty of time at the end for a question and answer session. And we're also going to try to live stream this on Facebook Live or Zoom, either one. We haven't got that figured out yet, but yeah. Good. So yes, we definitely want folks to, listen in virtually too, if you can't make it. So,
People are used to that these days. We love to be in person, but that is such a great resource for those that cannot
yes,
attend
yes,
the YouTube
absolutely.
and Facebook. Well, Brittany,
Yeah.
thank you so very much for joining us on Table Talk today. It's been a wealth of information. I've learned a lot today about
Yeah. Well,
species
good.
that you grow up with that we need
Uh-huh.
to help out. They need a little help, some of these birds, and restoring the grasslands. So we appreciate you joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure, huge honor. Thank you so much for interviewing me and taking the time to listen to what we're trying to accomplish. So thank
You're
you.
welcome. Well, and I'll also thank our audience for joining us today for this edition of Table Talk. We hope you've learned something. Spread the word about what's going on with the Grassland Initiative and the programs that people can participate in. We wish you a safe, healthy, and happy week, and join us again next week for more Table Talk.